I know people keep asking about it, but do we really need a Batman Beyond movie? Whoa, okay, calm down. All right, no need to go Will Smith on me. Hey everyone, David here with another McFarlane review. It's for one that I technically already reviewed, except I made the fatal mistake of covering the Inque version of Batman Beyond first, or if you want to call it as I see it, the blue variant. And so that's the one I came across first before coming across the actual legitimate Terry McGinnis Batman Beyond that we see before you here. And so I'm finally correcting that mistake by finally tackling the original black and red Terry McGinnis Batman Beyond McFarlane 7-inch figure. And so this is primarily going to be a comparison video as opposed to a general review, because for the most part, like I said, that blue variant covered all the basic points of this particular mold and sculpt version of that figure, that it's going to feel a little retready. So please pardon and be patient with me on that facet of the review, because we are going to be tackling similar sculptures, similar details, similar articulation, except, you know, we got to check all those boxes, because after all, it is a Dark Spider David review. Now, of course, here we have the Terry McGinnis Batman Beyond. McFarlane did in fact take just a couple of little liberties as far as design, because overall, he looks just like the traditional Terry McGinnis Batman Beyond, which we have yet to see in live action, as despite a lot of people's requests, but at least we do have him here in a McFarlane toy form, and he looks legitimately awesome. I could argue that maybe the ears could be a little bit more pointed on the head sculpt, but overall, it does the trick. It looks like a legitimate matte finish mask with the whited eyes, as well as the kind of like the black artistry of the cowl. I don't know how a cowl like this could be interpreted in live action form, but you can see right there that the lips are kind of blended in with the rest of the mask, but you see some lining going around that makes it look like it's maybe some kind of nanotech suit or something that's just retrofitted to this particular version. As we go down the rest of the actual design of the figure, you can see that the red Batman Beyond styled symbol on his chest is just a little larger than typically you're used to seeing on his actual chest with the original kind of design. His shoulders aren't as pointed, but overall the design is still lankier and skinnier, or at least more agile looking to fit that Terry McGinnis interpretation of Batman, as opposed to the stockier, more muscle-fueled Batman Bruce Wayne. And then you can see more of that coming through here with the utility belt. That is very, very much the Batman Beyond utility belt, as well as the hooks on his gauntlets. He's even got the claw hands that he's usually sporting whenever he has to go hand-to-hand with some goons. As it kind of goes on, it starts to become a little bit more traditional. You just have the matted kind of black texturing going along the body, but on the bright side, he doesn't have some issues that I've seen in some other McFarlanes kind of bleed on through, which is that some textures look different than others, so it has a much more uniformal approach. It doesn't look like different companies or different departments handle different parts of the figure and then just kind of Frankenstein it all together. As I've kind of mentioned in most recently with the Gotham Knights Red Hood video, or in some other occasions, I can't remember which one specifically, but there's been a number of McFarlanes where some pieces look matted and then some look glistening, and it kind of gives me that fear that maybe we're dealing with different departments. Thankfully, that's not the case here. Then we get to the wings, which are a little different than you would expect from the cartoon version of the character. The wings are pretty much their own separate parts, and they are legitimately wings sticking out from his back. They have the traditional red, so the shadowing of the red, the actual palette they went with is of course more true to form. It is, however, going to be a matter of preference as to whether or not you vibe with wings like this that are oversized and are meant to be kind of off of his back like traditional wings would be. They are articulated on their own. You could expand them off to the sides, and if you haven't already noticed either with my review of the Inque version or if you have seen it here in person, you'll notice that there's these little slots on each of the wings. That's because if you want to give him the more traditional look that you would come to expect from Batman Beyond in the comics and as well as the cartoon, you can actually clip the arms to those slots via a tab that's by the side of his gauntlets here that then hooks into that slot. So when you clip them in together, you can give him the traditional wing style look as if he's taken off for flight. And I guess while we're on the subject of articulating things, let's go ahead and cover said articulation, which, like I said, if you've already seen my review of Inque's Batman, you will notice that it's pretty much the exact same mold and the articulation is going to be the same. But in case you haven't, let's go ahead and do a quick recap. The head rotates 360 degrees and the joint inside allows some decent pivoting inwards, like you see right there, as well as outwards, very generously. Nothing extravagant, but at the same time, it does the trick, as well as being able to incline from left to right. I would probably say this is one of the more flexible ones because of the way that he's got a lankier build around the neck, and same goes for pretty much all the limbs of the body. Because of the slimmer physique that Terry McGinnis often sports, he's going to be able to be a little bit more flexible than your traditional McFarlane. So when you tackle the arms, obviously they're going to be able to rotate 360 degrees vertically, as well as extend to the sides very fluidly. But then of course you have the as I would like to call it once more, the butterfly joint there. Shout out to that viewer. I'm sorry, I cannot remember your name. I'll put it here on the screen, but shout out once again to that viewer for letting me know that these are called the butterfly joints, which are the extra pieces here inside of the shoulder that allow the flexibility to be able to shrug the arms inwards and outwards. I absolutely love it that McFarlane has been able to incorporate this into their figures, and that's personally one of my adorations about these particular figures here. And it's found once again in the shoulders. You of course have the bicep swivel, which can rotate 360 degrees in place, as well as the two joints in the elbow that allow it to bend all the way upwards, like you see before you there. Pretty much the same goes for the other arm, so nothing much different to cover there, as well as the wrists, which can obviously allow the hand to rotate 360 degrees, as well as pivot inwards and outwards. I would say it's a little more rigid on this figure than it was found on the Inque's Batman figure personally, but it could still be found there. And again, because the figure is a lot more slimmer than your traditional Batman, that torso joint also becomes a bit more flexible and fluid, as you're able to pretty much twist the body 360 degrees at the mid-torso joint, as you see right there. Just be careful with the wings, since they do kind of get in the way, but it never feels tight. It never feels like it's resisting within itself. It's really, really fluid without, at the same time, not feeling all that terribly loose, so that's pretty cool. And then waist articulation, similar to Inque's Batman. I feel like there's something in there, but it's not giving as much weight. It like slightly etches. I can kind of feel it moving in there, but it's not giving ways all that much. So I'm not going to force it, especially because of the mid-torso joint being allowing the movement to speak for both of them. So that can kind of be found there, but not really, if you really look at it that way. So moving on to the top of the legs, these top joints right here are extremely rigid and ratcheted, but they're not frustrating. Like, it's not like you have to fight with the joint. You can actually move the legs very well upwards, like you see right there, and actually not too badly when moving them backwards, because of the way that they're able to kind of give way with the butt sculpt over here. It's not as bad as found with other McFarlanes. And then as we're able to extend that patent McFarlane joint, or that hinge that you can find it right here, and when I say patent, I'm not really speaking officially. I just feel like out of all figures that I've come across when it comes to Batman or Spider-Man, I find this particular joint only in McFarlane's, but thankfully it allows for ratcheted rotation that clicks very satisfyingly from left to right as you extend the legs, as you see it right there. And then of course the double joint at the knee. Of course, just like with Inque's Batman, be careful flushing them towards the back here, because they do come into interference with the wings, so be careful not to break either piece, but you can bend both knees right there. And then moving down to the ankles, once again, because of the lankier physique of Batman Beyond, the ball joints are going to be a bit more apparent as you see them kind of protruding out from the ankles, as opposed to other Batmen that you've probably played around with. But pause. Other Batman figures that you've probably collected, I would say that these joints right here, of course, protrude more, but thankfully they also allow for some decent flexibility with the ankles, as they're able to fully rotate 360 degrees horizontally, as well as ratchet joints and movement going upwards and downwards. But they're very flexible, and they allow an awful lot of movement because of the fact that he's got less, body or ankle dealing with either the feet or the shins, so they allow that flexibility, slight pivoting even. I won't say it's not as great as I've seen with some other McFarlanes, but you can kind of feel it just a little bit. For me, I think it's a little bit more abundant in the right ankle as opposed to the left. Actually, there's virtually none in the left, but you can make do with what you got because of the flexibility again. And then, of course, the pointed toes that can be found on Batman Beyond as opposed to others that fully bend there at the toe hinge. Now, it is in fact at this point that before I go on into either accessories or any further distinctions about the red traditional Batman Beyond, that I would definitely want to call upon Inque as Batman here onto the screen so that I'm able to make some very clear depictions and distinctions between the two figures as soon as I can get Terry here to stand on his own. And there she is, right about right there. You can definitely see the significant differences. Not only do we have, of course, the blue accents, or rather, technically speaking, the indigo accents between the bat symbol on Inque versus Terry, as well as the utility belts, but then pretty much every part that is traditionally just straight out black on Terry's uniform, you can see that Inque as Batman Beyond personally has these kind of like blue ink kind of patterns going along the black, as well as distinctly the wings. You can see kind of like this spotty cowskin design. I don't know what else to really call it. I'm pretty sure that anybody that's got a huge knowledge of like fashion design or anything like that has the distinct name for that particular pattern, but they use that pattern to then kind of give that distinction to the wings and make it stand out and make it very much different from the traditional just plain red that you find on Terry. Nevertheless, you can also see, at least I'm discovering here for the first time, seeing next to them, both of them next to each other on screen, that there's a little bit more of a matte finish on Inque than there is on Terry. Even though Terry himself is matted, I would say it's a bit more profound or more consistent found on Inque, which to me was actually generally very surprising. Beyond that, I actually did not mean that. That was actually purely accidental. They both happen to have with two similar accessories, only of course both cater to their distinct color schemes. Terry came with an extra pair of black gloves here that are non-clawed, you can argue. They definitely look like they can hold something in either hand, and that's because both Inque and Terry both each came with their own batarang modeled after that traditional Batman Beyond symbol. Except, of course, following suit, Terry's is going to be this plain hot rod red as opposed to Inque's patterned out blue that is very similar to the pattern found on her wings. So you can definitely see right there the distinctions, but beyond that, it's the exact same molded accessory. Beyond that, yeah, I'm going to be doing this a lot in the review. Hopefully it's almost over here. But the articulation is the same, sculpting is the same, and as you can see, most of the accessories are the same. And I say most because Terry, however, comes with one little set of accessories that is much different than Inque's. In fact, Inque doesn't come with this at all. And it's an additional set of fire pieces, these translucent orange pieces that you can then attach to the soles of his feet. So if we can get Inque out of the way here, you'll notice that at the bottom of either of their feet, even Inque comes with the holes here on her feet, but with Terry, they are put there so that then you can slide the fire accessories into the soles of his feet, so that then you can make it look like he is taking off with his rocket-powered shoes. And that's also done by the included translucent base, similar to that of Inque as Batman Beyond. He comes with that ratchety and gotta be honest, kind of bad translucent base, because I wish that there was a little bit more flexibility with that thing. Because as it stands, it's like, okay, it can only be put in like one pose, and the only real thing that I can mess around with is Terry himself. But the base itself could have been a little bit better, and it's ideally the exact same one that they used for Inque, just kind of recycled over here with Terry as well. So, since I did not give Inque this treatment, I'll go ahead and do it to Terry. I'll go ahead and end the review with him actually taking flight on said accessory or on said translucent base, only because of that fire accessory. The fire accessory to be able to add to the shoes, I would say, is probably the redeeming factor here that makes me go, okay, fine, I'll do it with him. I'll do it with him, definitely. Especially since this is the OG. This is the OG Batman Beyond, Terry McGinnis with the red and black suit, my favorite Clash, and also a very distinct Batman that is very worthy of getting his own live action treatment, and yet we have yet to see that. Everybody's asking for it. Everybody wants Michael Keaton to play that old, begrudged Bruce Wayne to then teach Terry McGinnis the ways of becoming Batman, and I think it's about time. For the time being, I would say that despite the recent things that we have said for McFarlane toys, whether they be on the positive side or the good, I'd say they did a pretty decent job of handling the Batman Beyond interpretation. That I'd say he's a staple. If you're setting out to do what I'm doing, which is to collect as many Batman characters or versions of the character in McFarlane toy form as possible, Batman Beyond is kind of a must. So if you're able to pick him up at a reasonable price, because I know that he's a little bit more difficult to find in traditional retailers, I would say definitely take a chance on him. Maybe a different accessory or a better base would have been appreciated, but other than that, I would say with what you get by default with the traditional Batman Beyond, or with the variant that comes with the closed mouth but the build the Joker box pieces, I would say this is definitely a worthwhile acquisition to your McFarlane toy collection. For the time being, if you guys enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up. Make sure to drop a subscription if you guys want to check out further McFarlane toy reviews like the one showing up on screen right now. And as always, guys, stay humble.